Cowboys left the 2023 season with quite a few positives from the defensive side of the ball, but they also left the 2023 season with one big negative. That was stopping the run. We've already addressed how the Cowboys can improve that area from the linebackers' perspective, but today on Building the Board, we are addressing how they can improve from the defensive line standpoint. We've got Kyle Youmans that will be joining the show in just a few moments, but we got Patrik Walker to go ahead and help me break this down. But Patrik, I mean, when you talk about the offseason moves, right, the loss of Jonathan Hankins, Neville Gallimore, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, I mean, when you talk about those guys, huge hole to fill with this defensive line. Where would you address the current state of this defensive line?
Well, Nicole, first and foremost, you're going to have to look for a defensive tackle, and that be to back up Mazi Smith or to play alongside Mazi Smith. When you're talking about Mazi Smith, obviously a ton of pressure is on that young man going into his second year. Former first-round pick from 2023. Lost a lot of weight. Head coach Mike McCarthy spoke to that this offseason, said that he expects he and Mike Zimmer, the newly returned defensive coordinator, to bulk Mazi Smith back up and become that definitive nose tackle in the wake of losing Jonathan Hankins. But it cannot be overstated how much they need to address this position to make sure that that's the case. Chauncey Golston, he's going to have to step up as well. And then when you look at the outside of that defensive line, yes, you have DeMarcus Lawrence still playing at a Pro Bowl level. Yes, you have all-world talent and Michael Parsons, but you now lost Dante Fowler. You lose Dorrance Armstrong, like you mentioned, Nicole. Can Sam Williams step up and be that guy behind Michael Parsons? So many questions on the defensive line, and they have to have that answered before they go into this season.
Where would you rank this position of need heading into the 2024 NFL Draft?
I think it's right up there. Not necessarily as high as linebacker, not necessarily as high as running back, but when you talk about the Cowboys' inability to stop the run, that's been the crux of their struggles over the past 2-3 seasons, maybe even beyond. Took a step forward with the trade of Jonathan Hankins. That shows that they are now valuing the position. Obviously, the selection of Mazi Smith, that's the first time they did that since Russell Maryland, is using a first-round pick on a nose tackle. But again, that puts the pressure on Mazi Smith. And with Mike Zimmer coming in, two things Mike Zimmer loves to do with his defense: linebackers that can play at a high level, defensive tackles that can stop the run and be disruptive as well. So I expect the Cowboys and Mike Zimmer to approach this in the draft.
Quite a lot of talent in this defensive line class. We've got Kyle Youmans to go ahead and break down who he feels would be a great fit for the Dallas Cowboys, possibly.
You guys are exactly right. Defensive line is a sneaky need for this Dallas Cowboys team, not only as defensive tackles, and there's some names that the Cowboys will certainly rattle off, and a lot of names for those that have covered the NFL draft and kept up with the NFL draft that already know as Cowboys targets. But I'm going to give you a couple of edge rushers, because without Dante Fowler Jr., Dorrance Armstrong now moving on as well, there's a couple ways that this Cowboys team could revamp their edge rusher class. Now, the first one is a little bit of the out of the ordinary. We're going to go with the top overall edge rusher prospect, Laiatu Latu out of UCLA, 6'5", uber productive. He had 24 sacks during his career in the collegiate ranks. He also led the FBS with 21.5 tackles for loss last season. But he's not only a pass rusher, he's also a guy that can come in and stop the run as well. Here he is on the outside edge here. Long, lanky frame, that 6'4" frame. Here you're going to see him go across the line of scrimmage. Of course, guys normally want to set the edge on the outside. That's not what he does here. He actually moves with these tight ends with this left tackle. Doesn't get caught up with the eye wash. He goes on the outside of that, gets right by and over the top of this pulling guard, and another double team to get in the backfield and make the tackle. Long, lanky arms, he's got it done. Now, the one thing against Laiatu Latu is the fact that he did have some injuries. He actually medically retired during his time at Washington and then came back to UCLA, got clearance from different sources, and he had a phenomenal career with the Bruins. Now, if we move on, this is Senior Bowl prospect. This is Jordan Morgan, possible first-round offensive tackle. Watch how quickly Laiatu Latu makes quick work of Jordan Morgan. Boom. Swim move left side, had that chop and the rip underneath going through. He's got a couple different moves that he can use to his advantage. This one, just the swim to the left. He can go into the backfield, and he wreaked havoc on offensive tackles in the Senior Bowl. Now, I've got a fun prospect. That's a guy that would fall to you at 24 and you could be excited about if you wanted to go away from offensive line. I don't suggest doing that. It's just a possibility, everybody. Here's Dallas Hunt. This is a better possibility for a day 3 prospect. Houston Christian University is a transfer from Cornell. Not the most productive guy, even going up against some of the talent that he did in the lower ranks of college football. That's because he switched from the safety position to defensive line. You don't see that a whole lot, but he's got a 6'4" frame, some of the longest wingspan in the entire NFL draft at the edge rusher spot, and let's see what he can do. This is him on the outside. I mean, just look at the frame that you have to work with here. Raw talent, pure athleticism. Watch him catch this Western Kentucky running back without any hesitation off the line of scrimmage. He was unblocked, free release. He said, no problem, let me get in the backfield and get the job done. Now, based off of that, he had some sacks in his time at Houston Christian. This is him stopping the run. Moving into what he could do for you on the line of scrimmage, and we saw this a little bit with Dan Quinn. You like to use guys that can drop back in coverage. We'll see if Mike Zimmer wants to do the same thing as a defensive coordinator, but take a look at this. I mentioned how he looked like a safety, or he transferred from the spot at the safety position. Look at him track the ball and then take this thing to the house. Just easy money, pick 6. Don't throw it his direction. Don't run it his direction. Don't even throw the ball and try and scramble in his direction. Dallas Hunt is a value pick at the edge rusher spot, and he's somebody that I think would be an interesting selection for the Cowboys if they want an edge rusher in the third round, or third day.
Yeah, when you talk about that defensive end position now, D-Law, right, you have Micah Parsons, but would you think that Dallas Hunt and Leatu Latu would be some good rotational pieces for the Cowboys?
I mean, I think Dallas Hunt would be a rotational piece. Leatu Latu would be your future at the edge rusher spot opposite of Micah Parsons. I mean, he is that good to where you're making the switch as Leatu Latu and DeMarcus Lawrence. Let's say he's the heir to the throne that DeMarcus Lawrence would leave behind here in Dallas. He is a legitimate edge rusher. A lot of people have compared him throughout the draft community to a TJ Watt, which, of course, for draft Cowboys fans out there, Cowboys draft fans out there, that might throw a little bit of a wrench into things, but still a prospect that you can be excited about. If he falls to 24, which I think is the only real possibility that Dallas would even think about an edge rusher there, I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled the trigger and let him be the guy.
Cowboys not just thinking about the now, thinking about the long term as well. But when you talk about the defensive tackle position, who are some guys that have caught your eye, Patrik?
Well, when you're talking about defensive tackle, then you're going to talk about 2 guys that you're probably not going to have a shot at if you're the Cowboys, barring the world imploding and turning itself upside down. That's going to be Byron Murphy, and that's going to be T'Vondre Sweat. Byron Murphy, obviously, Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year, absolute menace on the interior of the defensive line, and of course his compatriot in T'Vondre Sweat, who himself is a Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Now, when you talk about Sweat, obviously some legalities have come up. We'll see how that impacts his draft stock, but again, barring those 2 guys falling out of the first round, you're probably not going to see them with the Cowboys. What I would look at is a guy like Darius Robinson out of Missouri, defensive end, stellar at stopping the run. Talk about losing Dorrance Armstrong. Darius Robinson is a guy who can come in off the edge, stop the run. He's powerful. He has the build. He can get the job done for the Cowboys and potentially have the ability to step into the role that DeMarcus Lawrence is in right now in the DeMarcus Lawrence era afterward.
One thing I want to add to that is just some other names of like Braden Fisk from Florida State. He's a guy that maybe if the Cowboys wanted to take a defensive tackle in the second round, he would be there. Because I agree with you. Going back-to-back drafts and drafting a defensive tackle in the first round would be a question mark because you use those resources to select Mazi Smith. He's 1 year into his NFL career, and while it was underwhelming at times, you can't give up on a first-round pick after 1 year of play, especially whenever he did lose some weight and almost went through a position change during his rookie season. So there's ways that you can combat that. I also like the value of a guy like McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M late in the draft. I think as a fourth-round grade on myself, I think he has a fourth-round grade. He may actually fall to the 4th or fifth in that regard. He's a run stuffer. He's a true nose tackle. He's somebody that you can put right there in the mix between guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, Osa Odigizua, and Mazi Smith as well.
Yeah, my question was going to be, what do you do with Mazi Smith, right? He was drafted to be a one-tech. How does that kind of change your approach heading into this draft?
I think when it comes to that, you have to throw the keys to Mazi Smith, and you have to throw it to him right now. If you're coming into the organization as a first-round pick, ideally, you're looking to be made an impact player from day one. Unfortunately, that did not occur with Mazi Smith. Thankfully, the Cowboys had Jonathan Hankins to kind of supplement that, but guess what? They no longer have Jonathan Hankins. So when you come into this draft 2024, I don't see a situation wherein the Cowboys feel as if they're going to utilize, like Cal said, another first or maybe even a second-round resource at nose tackle, knowing that you spent the first round last year on Mazi Smith. It has to be Mazi Smith right now and right here.
And you said give him the keys. I hope we're giving him the keys to the bus and not to the sports car that he had this year. I don't need speedy pass rusher Mazi Smith. I need Hog Miley up front, stuff the runs, keep the interior of the defensive line stout Mazi Smith. I want a guy who can be physical, big, and does not move. I want him to stay put and anchor that defensive line. We didn't get that in his rookie season, but could certainly see it in year number 2.
Get Mazi Smith some peanut butter and get him back to playing the nose tackle at the weight that he was playing at Michigan, and you'll see some great things from that young man.
I like that. I like that. I know head coach Mike McCarthy is very confident in what Mazi Smith will possibly do this upcoming season. A lot of excitement for this 2024 NFL Draft. Be sure to stick with us here on Building the Board. We'll be breaking down some more key pieces all throughout the offseason. That's a wrap. We'll see you next time.